Can we invite Eugene?
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, let's get started. Well, Emmanuel, I'm founder and co-CEO of Bubble here. So first of all, welcome to our offices, and excited to get started today. Just as a quick intro, so we're used to be called as a no-code platform, and now with AI, this is changing quite a bit. Bubble is a platform that lets you build your application without writing code. So I call that vibe coding without the code at this point. And yes, so we've been in New York for now 14 years, so very much rooted in the Manhattan and New York area. And so excited to host something for New York Tech Week. So thank you for being here. And I'll let Alex moderate.
All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Alex Conrad. I'm the founder and editor of Upstarts Media. I was at Forbes for 12 years, where I ran the Midas list and the Cloud 100. So if you read any of the good tech cover stories in Forbes during those 10 years, that was me. If you read any bad ones, that was not me. But for over a year, I've been running my own startup here in New York, Upstarts. We are a media journalistic endeavor with a Substack newsletter, a weekly podcast where I talk to high-growth CEOs, like tomorrow we'll have an episode with the CEO of Vanta coming out. A lot of fun with that, and then I also get to do a bunch of events, either speaking or hosting our own. So I'm excited to be here with some old and new friends. So I will introduce everybody. So you have Emmanuel, and then you have Ezra, who is the co-founder and CEO of Ohana. And they work with Bubble. They are also a startup. Then you have Dorothy, who I've known when she was back in the comms days, but she's a venture partner at Flybridge and can bring some investor perspective as well. And yeah, I'm going to talk as little as possible after that, but I think this is a crazy time in startups. So I'm excited to have you guys talk. I guess my first question for you guys is, what actually is a coming out party or launch moment for startups today anyway? Is it just renting a sports car and putting a launch video on Twitter? Or do you guys think about big moments that are sort of, this is the moment we launch, or this is the day one for our startup? Well, I'll give it to you, Ezra.
Sure. I was thinking about this earlier today. Like, did Ohana even have an MVP? I'm looking at my co-founder, I'm trying to remember. And I remember something that we said to each other in the early days was like, have many launch parties. We were planning a launch party, and we were gonna have like state teams help us throw a launch party for folks at college students. We're a subletting marketplace, and in New York City, but that was like anything longer than 30 days or less than 12 months. So it fills the gap between Airbnb and streets. And I think we had many launches, and I think for our market, just especially, every single time we go to a new market is a new launch, and it always requires creativity. And even for us, our business changes every season. So each season is going to be a launch. And what, because earlier today, we're working here, we were talking about like, well, be an MVP of this new idea. So I could get into more of that, but I think that there's never one launch. It's probably my answer to you, and the skills that you have and the things that you have at your disposal determine what that launch looks like. And we can not spend that much money, and we try to test things before we build them. And so we eat that.
I think that's a very healthy perspective to have. I think back in the day, I started my career, as Alex mentioned, in comms and PR, and I was helping a lot of founders figure out how to launch their startups and how to continue the momentum. But the launch was a big thing back then, like 15, 20 years ago. You made a big deal about it, and if you got the Forbes reporter, the TechCrunch reporter to write about you, that was like, you know, you made it. It meant something. And things have changed a lot since then. The coverage of really early stage startups has dropped a lot, and I think that's a healthy thing too. There was a time when there was a lot of kind of founder worship and not a lot of scrutiny, and now I think the bar is a lot higher for getting press coverage, as it should be. But it also means that for startups, you can launch safely, like without worrying about what everybody's going to think about what you're doing. You kind of quietly go out there and just start getting customers. And I think what I'm seeing a lot more of, because I invest at the very earliest stages, like pre-seed and seed stage startups, what I'm seeing at the very earliest stages is that, you know, there's a lot of founders out there who are going to go out and get customers maybe even before MVP, just to see, like, would a person click on this? Would a person buy something like this? Because you can do a lot of kind of customer feedback and a lot of information even before your product is fully done. And then when your product is never done, so you're always constantly going out there and testing things and trying to get things in front of people. But the big, like, kind of splashy launch party, Ferrari, whatever press coverage thing, I think is much less common today than it used to be.
I don't know if I'm the most qualified to talk about the launch because we've been around for 14 years now, so definitely part of the old world. Even though, I mean, we're launching features often.
And people are launching products on your platform all the time.
Right, so that's the meta, like Ohana, that's the meta aspect. But the way I think about launches today is first when we release features. And yes, I think in today's world, like having a direct connection with your users is something that is much more important and much more possible than back in the day. I did work very hard to get TechCrunch or Forbes coverage back in the day. It's not something that I would try to do today. And on the flip side, I mean, trying to get directly with users. We live in a world now where there are so many new products emerging every day. A lot of people are launching features very frequently, given how AI is changing the game when it comes to creating product. That I think it's very important to convince your audience that you can keep moving fast and you can keep building things that is going to be valuable to them. And that is, I think, better done directly in a genuine way than through press, even though press still is important. I'm not saying it's not, but I think the use case for press is a bit different today.
Well, I don't mind if you guys don't talk to TechCrunch and Forbes, but if you said don't talk to Upstarts, we'd have a problem. I did, not to be too promotional, but I think it's relevant. We published a story this morning about a startup called Lassie that works in dental offices. They reached about 700 dental practices without really announcing themselves to the world, mostly through word of mouth. And they reached 10 million in ARR. And then they had just raised this big round, and they sort of brought me that news and sort of like a lot of the first real external exposure about the company. But two things were really interesting to me. One, they built this all kind of quietly through word of mouth. But two, they did embed closely with their customer to iterate on that product. So yes, you could build really fast, but the founders actually spent a few months working in dental offices to understand what the heck they should be building in the first place. And where that goes with the question here, especially because Bubble helps you build these things, is we're in a moment where it's easier than ever to build that MVP, to vibe code or not even know how to code and still ship a product. And then it seems like the challenge is, what is the right product? So how do you guys think about that, either in the startups you're meeting, Dorothy, or at Ohana and Bubble, in terms of knowing that we're not just burning tokens and building things for the hell of it?
Yeah. I think the point of an MVP is basically to validate two things. Like, is the problem I'm solving worth solving? And is my solution or my idea close to the real solution? And I think that question doesn't change. And answering that question changes only in the sense that, like, what used to look like a solution is now easier to build. So like anybody can go ahead and like basically right before this meeting, we were all talking about solving this problem. We partner with different companies to help their interns find housing. And one of those partners is OpenAI. And they have this like fall cohort. And we're talking about what we did well over the summer and what we didn't do well. And so each of us came into that meeting with like a different prototype solution for what it would look like, and they all look pretty similar. And I think a lot of companies probably have that, where like everybody now comes to a meeting with like a mock-up of basically what it could look like. And so the question is a little bit less about like, you know, going on Figma and like having like the visual design, but like the deeper level, how will this be different than what we've been doing in the past? And I think to your point, one as these folks were talking about launching, I kind of think, bear with me with this analogy, it might be a little bit out there, but the other thing that you would launch besides a company would be like you launch your relationship. Like people call it a hard launch, right? And my girlfriend's back there looking at me. And I think it's relevant because by the time you launch your relationship, you've like built a real relationship. You've been together for a little while, like you're comfortable with it, like this is like an announcement to the world. And I think before I would launch anything with Ohana or do like a product feature or anything like that, we would want validation, we would want to like test it. And so just to kind of bring it home, the relationship for your business is customers that are paying you that actually find you to be valuable. And before I put something on LinkedIn, I'm like back channeling to see like, okay, Oracle, OpenAI, are you gonna positively endorse this? Like, I'm thinking about announcing this, right? So you don't just like launch before you know what you're doing. And yeah.
Is that a soft launch then?
No, we're fully dating. We're
No, I didn't mean the relationship. I meant the product. But fair enough.
Yeah, that's enough for me.
Well, I'm curious. How do you guys feel about that idea of getting conviction to maybe declare a product launch, or maybe a promising MVP versus maybe a very tentative soft launched MVP?
Yeah. I mean, I think, so
You're good.
from an investor perspective, I have a really hard time imagining, in today's world, investing in somebody pre-MVP now. And I was doing this as recently as last year. I invested in a startup pre-MVP, like idea half-baked, but based on the founders. Because today, like, there's no reason not to have an MVP. You can just go home and make one right now. I've built 5 or 6 different weird things just for fun in the past couple of months that you could consider an MVP. Unless you're working on something that's like extremely deep tech, very complex, like requires like a lot more, like you should be able to mock up something pretty easily. So so things have changed a lot, and it's a crazy time when day one you can have an MVP. But that's the reality. And so I used to think, you could pitch an idea, but an idea wasn't really the thing that was valuable. It's really about whether you can execute against it, right? And that's something that I think we know. But today it's like an idea isn't really valuable, and an MVP isn't really valuable either. You've got to have a little bit more than that. You've got to be able to show that this is something that people want and customers want and makes sense and has growth potential. Going back to what you were saying too about being in a world where you can, like, you don't want to just like burn through 1 million tokens. One of our portfolio company CTOs told me something I thought was fascinating, which is they just build everything now. Like, they're not so precious anymore about what to build and building out that roadmap and talking about it and thinking about it like really hard up front. Instead, they kind of just build everything, and then they decide what they want to commit, what they want to keep. Because it's in that building process, when they're agentically coding parts of their platform, sometimes your agents come up with a different way of thinking of something, right? It's generative. And so some of it is crazy and they don't want it, and some of it is actually pretty interesting stuff that they haven't thought about before. So their kind of strategizing about product comes later in the process than it used to. I thought that was an interesting approach.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think I don't want to say the MVP is dead, because I think there is still something to be described for the early stage of a product, but the bar has gotten much, much, much higher, right? What used to take weeks to launch can be done in a few hours at most, and then you launch it. I think what's critical is to build something, as Dorothy just said, something that people want to use and pay for, and that's rarely going to happen from the initial build. So then I go back always to this velocity aspect, like it's about iterating on the product fast enough, faster than the competition, because if you don't do that in hours or days, someone else will, and will get somewhere that people actually want to pay for. So that's really, I think at this point the MVP is not just like the actual code or no code that you put in front of people, is a concept you put in front of people, but the process you build within your team to move as fast as possible when you get feedback and iterate in hours, because again, otherwise if you don't do that, someone else will in this market.
So I guess that makes me wonder, is the term MVP kind of outdated or meaningless in this moment? Like, if a minimum viable product could be something that we vibe code in an hour, or it could be something that's already reaching millions in revenue before you even met with an investor, it feels like that stretches the definition to not even be really helpful. So I'm curious if you guys have another term that you prefer, or if there's just a framework that you would recommend for founders in the audience to think about a healthier
Maybe for you. Yeah.
approach than let's ship an MVP that could be anything.
I don't know if we ever use the words MVP, but we validate a lot of different things. And one thing that we generally say is like the things that work tend to work quickly. So it doesn't really take months to validate an idea. Like, you put it out there and like you pretty much see if there's interest. Whether or not, we have enough people on the platform now where you can test stuff very quickly, but even in the early days before we had people, you'll get interest. So like one of the ideas that we have all these ideas. And one of them was like a community for girls who sublet. And we just call it Girls Who Sublet. And that community has completely dominated. And it's like, it could eclipse our whole business. Like it might even make sense for us to like put that first and then like everything else next. Just because like there's a real need for it. You quickly see the accounts that we make it for grow really fast. And so we have this like franchise of like Girls Who Sublet Facebook groups, TikTok accounts, Instagram accounts, all this stuff. And it's not that we ever said like, oh, we need an MVP. Like we just created the account. We like put some time towards that one. We also have one called Artists Who Sublet. We also had one called, Bondi Sublets. Like we had all these different ideas and like that one worked. And then we just put more and more resources behind it. But what I would say is like the MVP for us at least, which is a network business where we have humans on the platform and we don't sell software. We sell basically connections to other people and staying in their places. The MVP is not just software. It's like some validated idea and we wouldn't believe in it unless there's some return, some revenue or some interest. And yeah, I have one more point. It'll probably come back to me.
I think that the point that you're making is a good one, especially for first-time founders to think about, which is the fact that like MVP might be the starting line, but the rest of the startup journey is constant experimentation and constant building and trying things out and shipping different things. So the MVP itself is really just like getting the party started. For me as an investor, I don't think that much about MVPs. I think about it, I have a different framework that I use to evaluate founders by that, I don't know, it's a little snarky. It's an MVF, it's minimum viable founder, because I invest at the very earliest stages of things, at pre-seed and seed, and the thing that is most indicative of what's going to happen with that startup is who the founders are and how they operate and what makes them who they are. And so I think I do have a framework for that that has nothing to do with like how much product they've built at this moment. It's how crazy obsessed are they about a certain problem, how convinced are they that they're the ones that are going to solve it, and do they have that capacity and agency to be able to do it, and how unconventional of a person are they in the way that they think and live. And I care way more about that than exactly how developed the product is at the moment.
Emmanuel, with Bubble customers, can you guys see a level of traction or sort of like response to something that was built, with Bubble's support, where it feels like it's maybe a real MVP in the current sense with legs versus, an experiment that will be thrown out within 30 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, by definition, because we host everything, so we can see a lot of the traction. In practice, we pretty much, I've never heard the word MVP in quite a while here when we talk about our users. Usually we talk about the first version of the product, and then where we spend most of our time as a company is actually for products that have been already scaling, where we're definitely not at the MVP phase, and we're in the production phase. I think one of the interesting things that's happening right now is that because it's much easier to build the first, I'll call it MVP for once, but first version of your product, the next frontier now is production, and how do you create something that actually works at scale and doesn't challenge it. So that's the challenging part, for which I think we can still do better collectively, and vibe coding is not the best approach there yet. I mean, we haven't seen many products yet being vibe coded. That's one thing that differentiates us as a business, because we've been around for such a long time that we have some products have been on the platform for a while, and therefore, because scale takes time to come. But that's really the next frontier, where making sure you're building something that will work in production reliably is difficult. And so to your question, that's where we spend most of our time. So yes, we see a lot of these tools, like products like Ohana, and then our job as a company is, when we see the traction happening, is try to accompany them as much as possible, because scale remains hard. AI makes a lot of things easier, but scaling a product with millions of users and usually a lot of money in transactions that gives you like some responsibility, legally speaking, is something that needs to be done very carefully, and that's what we do, yeah.
I'm curious what you guys consider the new table stakes or the new bar to feel like a product does have traction, whether it's users or revenue, because we see these stories about, could one person reach $1 billion in revenue on their own, which it's debatable whether someone did. There's a whole news cycle about that. But we also see, social accounts spike like crazy, knowing whether that girls who sublet is like a micro trend that will be gone in 3 days or something to actually deploy resources behind. So I'm curious how each of your frameworks have changed in this sort of current quick twitch moment for where something is worth investing in.
I think for us, question number one is like, are people willing to pay for it? So that's a really good place to start. And then the next question is, are people willing to pay for it in multiple places? So to your question about girls who sublet, like if it was just a New York phenomenon, then that would be the thing. But it also works in London, and also works in Boston, and these other places. I'd be really curious to hear what Dorothy thinks for early stage companies, like what the revenue metrics are now. And, yeah.
I mean, a year ago, it was really typical for a company that was raising a Series A to have, $1 to $3 million in ARR, and that was like, yeah, you can reasonably go out there and try to raise a Series A. Whether you did or not is a question, but like you're not going to get left out of the room. That you meet a certain bar, and today, like seed investors don't blink at that. Like, okay, what else? And it's kind of crazy how fast things have changed. I'll give you an example. I had a founder actually come meet with my whole investment team yesterday that has nearly $20 million in revenue, and some of that is MOUs, and it's not real revenue, but it's a good mix. They've been around for 7 months, and we're not investing in them.
Cool.
Wow.
What's the valuation?
No, the valuation's fine. It's reasonable. There's a lot of other factors involved, but the point I'm making is like the metrics are not the only thing. Like there's always everything else that you have to evaluate a company by. Like what kind of market is it? Do we think it's going to grow? Do they have a reasonable plan? Do they seem like people that understand what they're doing? Are they going about this strategically? Are they going to be able to command a big audience and grow a big audience, and all of the things? And so it's never been just about the metrics, but now is a particularly crazy time where the numbers are even higher, and you still have like many other barriers to cross, but those numbers can go kind of to the moon, and it still doesn't matter. Like,
wow,
it feels like anybody can do anything. It's crazy.
I guess to a question about how do we define traction, I have two ways to respond to that. I mean, one way that is very much because of the way the platform is built is traffic, ultimately. If someone has traffic, that's where we start looking at a product that is built on us, and then we reach out to the team to find ways to accompany them better. But then I have another way to respond to that, which kind of goes back to my old school bootstrapping years, which is can you make money, and can you actually generate money? I think today we're in a world where the cost of building is going cheaper and cheaper by the day, and so you can build businesses without having to fundraise, which I think is really cool. So. For context, not everybody probably knows that here, but we've bootstrapped Bubble for 7 years before raising our first round. So I've really seen the two sides of that coin. And I think it's very exciting right now that you can create something for very cheap that can generate money, be profitable, and don't have to talk to investors who are amazing people, but sometimes if you don't talk to them,
We're pains in the ass.
You feel better if you don't talk to them. And so, yeah, ultimately, like as Ezra is saying, if you build something that people are willing to pay for, and you see the number of money you're making going up, that's traction. And it doesn't have necessarily to be, like 500% per year or something. In fact, especially if you're not trying to fundraise, you can build a very successful, meaningful business that impacts you and your team financially, of course, but even like the people that use the product in very beneficial ways. And these businesses really deserve to exist.
I think we're in a really crazy time now, like, going back to what I was saying before, there are people that are raising like billion-dollar quote-unquote seed rounds, which is insane. And the problem, if you're trying to work on something that's a very reasonable business and you're raising like $5 million, like somehow you're competing against them, it doesn't make any sense anymore. But I think I agree with what you're saying completely. Like if you're able to bootstrap, because now the cost of everything is so much cheaper, if you're able to bootstrap and build a business that's profitable and you own the whole thing, why would you give any of that up? Like, unless you absolutely had to, if you're building in a space that's really hard, that requires a lot of upfront capital, like hardware, or you're in a regulatory space where it takes forever, or you have these enterprise sales cycles that are really long, or you need, for some reason, a ton of people or a million agents, if you can just build that on your own, like that's kind of the dream. Like build it, own it, you get to decide your future. When you decide to go venture scale, suddenly a lot of pressure comes along with it. And I think that people kind of romanticize this idea of like raising a lot of money and getting a high valuation and being able to grow and get all this attention. But it comes with a lot of crap, honestly. Like there's a lot of pressure to grow and look like the trajectory of other fast-growing companies. Because VCs are trying to pressure you to build and grow to a valuation that's going to return our funds and make our LPs money. But if you just have to make yourself happy, like that's awesome.
To that point, there's two friends that we have that come to mind. One, he's got this huge, big company, like by our standards, right? So it's called WAP. They're in our building, and they, the multi-billion-dollar valuation, just had like a $200 million investment. And we had dinner with them not that long ago, and like they have to be very, very, very ambitious and take on multiple markets and compete with huge incumbents. And you kind of like sit across from him and you're like wonder like, are you building this for yourself, or are you building this because like you have all this pressure on your shoulders and like it needs to be massive? And I mean he's an incredible guy, and like I think that they will crush it, and they do great things. But we have two businesses. So we have this business, they're both built on Bubble. And we have another business that's really small. We own 100% of it. It's very predictable. It's a college phone wallet. It like holds your ID cards and dorm keys. We still sell it. And like, there's a lot of peace in that. And I think I guess my theme for this whole kind of conversation is, now that you can build anything or any person can spin something up really quickly, I think the constraint is no longer software. It's like focus. And so what can you focus on? And even if you can spin things up really quickly, to get them to be used by real people and to get real people to pay money for it, it requires a lot of focus for sitting with them, understanding if it really solves their problem, and then seeing if that's even worth you doing. Because you can solve someone's problem. Like I could spend a day with you and like basically act as a servant and like find ways to solve your problem, but that doesn't necessarily make sense for me as a business. So like
sounds good to me.
Exactly. And we end up in situations like that where like we provide a service but we're over delivering, and like I can't do that either. So I think the focus is the constraint, and to have a good MVP, if we want to use that word, or to validate idea, you need a lot of focus.
Speaking of focus then, where do you see peers or the discourse on Twitter/X, or sort of like the broader community, where do you see people maybe losing their sense of gravity there, or taking an approach that you would not follow yourselves, or caution startups to be following yourself? Sort of like misconceptions or keeping up with the Joneses pressure for founders today that you guys do not subscribe to.
I'll be brief. I think a lot of people chase the same idea. So it's like very clear how AI can be useful for like, phone calls to doctors' offices or airlines, or like really any use case of like triage, customer support. And so I have like, a lot of people that are very smart that are all chasing the same idea, and they're all raising a lot of money to try to like go after that. But where I think there's not enough focus is like going to these sleepy businesses that provide a lot of value. And like our first business is sort of in this category of like collegiate products. It's a very sleepy business. Like they're not even in the 2010s, like they're in the 1990s, maybe even earlier. And like sitting there as somebody who understands how to use Cursor and has like a basic understanding of like business sense, you could provide a ton of value from somebody that's like 2 generations ahead of you. And I think that that's underrated right now, and like people can be really creative with it, and they can pick, particular niches and just like bring a generational divide together with the tools that exist. Because if I sat with my dad, who actually studied computer science, he's shocked with like what we have. And I think that's underrated. I think the biggest opportunities are probably overvalued.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. There's a lot of kind of massive companies that are, have multi-billion or multi-hundred billion dollar valuations, and there's no clear sense of how they'll actually grow into those valuations, because the market size is don't seem to correspond. Like in the legal market, for example, like if you add up the total sum of what all the legal AI startups are saying that they're valued at, like it's just not possible that there's that much business out there. And if there was, but it was all being serviced by AI, the margin would have to compress, and there's no way that they're making that much money. So I think there's some craziness out there for sure. I think that a lot of people are building things just because it's easy to build it. And so they're like, oh, I work in this space, let me build this thing. I solved my problem, amazing. Which is like the mantra that like we've all been saying in the startup world for a long time, like solve your own problems. But the size of the problem matters too. Like if you're going to solve a problem that is massive and could end up meaning that your company is worth over $1 billion, then it's worth thinking about venture funding and if, you know, to help you grow and capture that market. But if it's not, and it's kind of a smaller problem, like that's cool too, but understand where you sit and that you don't have to raise venture funding to go after it.
So the question was, what's something, school of thoughts that we see in the world?
Founder misconceptions or a meta-narrative that just personally you do not subscribe to, you log off when you see it, Emmanuel.
I think there is a thing, so I just said with the latest technologies, building products is getting easier and easier. And so I think there is a little bit of a thing about, you know, building companies getting easier, and I think that's not true. I think, yes, building the first version of your product and iterating on it will be easier, but it's easier for a lot of people, and therefore the marketplace is getting more and more competitive, and therefore the journey itself is not easier. In fact, it is probably getting harder by the quarter or by the month. And so I think what's really critical is find something that you're extremely passionate about, because there are going to be some tough times. I mean, I've been doing this for 14 years now, you know, I've been the founder for 14 years. And so it's definitely quite a journey, and, you know, there are up and downs and everything. And I don't think these technologies are changing. And so that one thing we're seeing, and in some ways I'm not blaming anyone here, because I think it's a good messaging to share with people that, you know, it's easier to create companies and people should try, because I think the whole point of technology is to level the field and have more people try things. But also keep in mind that you're setting yourself for like an interesting journey with a lot of fun, but also a lot of tears at times, and you have to get ready for it.
I think to riff off of that, there's been a lot of discourse, at least on Twitter/X, around this grind maxing. I don't know if you guys have heard this term. I don't know if
I've heard a lot of maxing, but not that one actually.
Okay, so this one is, there's a startup I won't name to pick on them or to give them attention, but there's a startup in San Francisco that is running a 24/7 cafe for other people to come work out of. And a lot of the employees live in the office in bunk beds. They've gotten tattoos of the company logo on their arms, and they literally live, breathe the company. This has led to some pushback from other successful founders. And in the back and forth, the CEO of this company compared his startup to the Manhattan Project and said that if you were working on the Manhattan Project, you wouldn't say, I want the weekend off, or I need to rest and recharge. People said, okay, you're in a vertical software area. This is, probably, I think, there's like, we will all be careful about the fallout from, the crazy giant tests that this company is obviously not going to do. They're not doing nuclear tests. But it obviously set off a big discourse around sort of what is a healthy balance there. And I think to frame that into an interesting question maybe for the audience, I feel like there's a natural push-pull here where you could use agents, you could use these tools to automate some of your workflow, theoretically ship while putting in less grinding time, more time to think or, see your family, whatever. On the flip side, there's pressure where 3 million in ARR is the new, is what 1 million was. Everyone else is growing so fast. If I'm not running 10 agents while we're up here, doing the panel, I'm falling behind, right? Which creates this idea of 24/7 always on. I'm curious how you guys are balancing this and thinking about it, especially, Amanda, you've been doing this for 14 years, but how you guys are all thinking about it. And then Dorothy, when you talk to founders, is this something you're testing them on or checking them on? And what do you guys think is sort of the healthy balance right now?
I mean, I think that is like very, very pressing question. I think it's also similar to other shifts that have happened before. So like software has made some people much, much more productive than they ever were. And it's also made the lives easier of a lot of other people. Like I have friends that work at big companies that work 3 or 4 hours a day, maybe less, 2 hours a day. And like they have a pretty good salary. Like we have a lot of salary overlap. Some of them probably make a good amount more than me. They work way less. And like, you know, who's the foolish one in that calculus? Like, you know, so I think it just depends on, you know, who you are. Are you gonna like get this tool that makes you more productive? Does that mean you're working more or you're working all the time? I would venture to say that the people that are grind maxing would have been grind maxing without AI, and they would have been grind maxing before software. And like those are people more innately than the tools around them change them. And I will also say like every startup is a cult. I think that's like an honest answer to people, and like the founders kind of lead that cult. And like if you want to join, and you know it comes with a real stigma. It's a real thing. If you want to join that cult, then you're like signing up for this culture that's created by like a couple people. And you know I think people should be really honest about that. And like I have friends that come to me and they're like, hey, do you want to work at startups? And I'm like, it's a real, like it's not always pretty. You know, like it's a real thing. It's hard. To develop something. But the upside of that is that you can always answer the question of like, why is my life meaningful? Like what will be different about the world because I'm here? And I think some people are just uncomfortable living without being able to answer that question, and they'd rather work a lot of hours and feel like their life has meaning. And then other people are like able to answer that question in ways outside of work. And I'm probably more on the side of, you know, I'd rather be able to point to this will exist because of me, and you know, I'd rather just grind max.
I'd probably have a different answer if the Knicks weren't in the finals playing later tonight, where I do resent if I can't watch a basketball game at night as a founder. But yeah, Dorothy, what about you?
I think at the end of the day, we have to all respect that we are human beings living in society with other human beings, and our goals shouldn't be to give up your life in service of vertical SaaS applications. Like that doesn't make sense to me. As an investor, of course, I want my founders to be working hard and their teams to be working hard. I want them all to hire very ambitious people who want to work hard and enjoy solving problems and doing hard things and are motivated by that. But I think they all deserve to have lives too. I think we all do. And I think certainly as I've aged, like I think I've learned to value that more in my life, and I have kids now and a husband, and like I want to spend time with them and raise my children well. And I think that as you mature, you also get smarter about where to spend your time. So I think like the grind maxing thing is probably something that like younger people are a little more susceptible to, who have time and less perspective perhaps as well. But I think it's always been a problem in the startup world, or always been a threat in the startup world, that people are taking things a little bit too far. It's probably especially strong now, just as everything, like AI is amping everything up. So yeah, AI is amping this up too. But it's important for us all to remember why we're actually here as human beings.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with pretty much everything Dorothy just said. It's tricky, right? Because it's a competitive marketplace. You're dealing with people around you, and some of them are probably working extremely hard. The one risk I'm seeing, I mean, it's a question I have to think about as CEO here, because we have 140 people, and we're not doing this grind maxing as you see some very small teams in San Francisco mostly, by the way. It's more of a San Francisco thing, I think, than a New York thing.
New Yorkers work hard anyway, right? We always have. Everybody always has.
Yeah, but not as hard as Silicon Valley, I think. I think the case you're mentioning is probably a San Francisco-based
Well, I think it's a cultural thing, right? Like, I mean, my wife works at a startup here. I'm a founder. We will have dinner and then go back on our laptops at home. Mm-hmm. Is my wife's office full at 9 p.m. the way that maybe some of these San Francisco companies? Probably not. Right. Does that mean people aren't checking Slack and doing work? I think they are. I think it's just sort of not as performative.
So that's the thing. I think there's a balance. The main risk I'm seeing here with this culture is that it creates a very young, because as you're pointing out, yet it's mostly young people working like that way, and a very one school of thought team that I think at first, when it's very small and you're building the first version of your product, it's okay. But at some point, you're going to want a little bit more of a diverse team, in particular when it comes to age and like experience. There are a lot of things that, having been in business for 20 years, teaches you some things about scaling a business. And I'm not just talking about technology scaling, like anything, HR, any kind of process that can happen, that at this point you need years of experience. And so if you have this culture where you limit yourself to people that want to live in the bunk beds and basically sleep on top physically of their coworkers, you're going to miss that experience. And so I think it's fine at first, but over time, organizations will evolve. And I'm pretty sure that these companies you're mentioning will have to evolve. When I think of my own journey as a founder, I mean, for the first 5 years, it was just Josh and I. We were both working pretty much 7 days a week, not because we were grind maxing or anything, because we loved it. And I think it's a very healthy thing. But today it's definitely different for me. I mean, I have a family like you. I mean, I have kids that I do want to see grow up and make sure I'm here for them. But also, I'm proud to have a team that has a various level of experience with many different generations that can help me say, hey, be careful with this, because I've seen that before. I see how it plays out, and there is a risk here. And you would lose that if you just have a bunch of 20-year-old grind maxing. But it is tough because the pressure you're getting from these smaller teams is real.
So I guess the logical next question there is just, when we see this world where Anthropic, OpenAI are approaching trillion-dollar valuations, they're talking about the end of software in a couple of years, et cetera. How do you guys find motivation to spend a lot of time on less shiny, less validated by crazy valuation projects? Like, this is something I grapple with as a founder too. Like, I'm curious how each of you in either the companies you work with or with your own team find the motivation to keep going and feel ambitious about what you're building, when at least on the outside you're not like, well, we went from 0 to 45 billion in revenue in a year like Anthropic might claim.
I think for me at least, it's probably the same reason that we created the company, because there's a lot of meaning in solving a problem that other people experience, and seeing that you've helped in some small way, but hopefully across a lot of people, and also seeing that you've grown as a person along the way. So I think that is like the intrinsic motivation. And then once you work on something with other people for a long time and you see all the sacrifices they made, like, I think that is a very, very strong motivator that keeps people working, because the company is the company and the results are the results, but like the people in your life that will sacrifice for you, you also need to sacrifice for them. And that's a very strong motivator.
So it's the journey and the friends you made along the way.
It's cliches. It's the cliches. But honestly, what I don't mean to change the topic, but next time Emmanuel speaks, I'd love to hear his thoughts on this. So the product launch was a big problem, and like big reason why we used Bubble is to ship a product very quickly. But now, what differentiates us is not how quickly we ship. It's like the humans on the network, the growth of the platform. So, and even the way that we've worked together recently is more around like publicity and like mutually helping us get more awareness, which of course helps with more traffic to the platform and revenue. How do you guys think about providing like other ways to launch, like besides the product, but like some press or some sort of growth-oriented stuff?
Yeah, I mean, that's something we realized pretty recently, actually, that we should do much more here, and that just enabling people to build a product was not enough in this market. So we launched the Launch Labs that you're familiar with. So it's basically a program, and we had a few iterations on that in the past, but I'm very happy with the latest iteration here, where our goal is, yes, to do whatever we can to make the businesses launching the platform succeed. And so, yes, that means partnerships, of course, co-marketing, press. We use some PR agencies because they still, even though sometimes they do bad Tinder dates, they might still be useful at times. And so we provide these kind of services because ultimately our success is only when our users succeed. And that's the way we do it. We're still looking for ideas here, by the way. Like I think it's still early for us to figure out, in a market that is changing so fast, how do we ensure that companies that are built on Bubble succeed? But that's where I'm spending more and more of my personal mind share, because at this point, I mean, the engineering team has to keep shipping and we have to do a lot of things on the product side. But if we cannot, because of the business model we're in, where we don't sell tokens today, we really sell, hosting. We host things on our platform. We do well as a business when our users do well as a business. And so whatever we can find, if you have more things that we can do to help, please let me know, because that's very much very top of mind for me.
Awesome.
I wonder if you think about things the same way I do, where I'm like, the capital is kind of a commodity, and we are also always looking for ways to add value to our portfolio companies. And I think that I share this sentiment with other VCs as well as other, technology platform providers. Like, had a similar conversation with folks at AWS and at Red Hat recently. We're all trying to figure out how to help our customers get more customers, right? And I guess that's kind of the point of the PR and the marketing, but right. you could even be a little bit more tactical in terms of making direct connections to people within your ecosystem. That's certainly what we're trying to do more of now too.
And I think, to finish on a positive note, I think that's one of the exciting things of the tech space. I don't think you see that many sectors where people, I think, genuinely try to help each other. Of course, sometimes, some guys are competing with each other, and someone might die because another one wins. But I would say, if you look at a lot of industries, there's not that much help between the different players. But the tech world is such. We talk about tech stack for a reason, right? It's a stack where you have different layers, and so anytime one thing gets better, pretty much everybody wins, and that's why the space is growing so fast. So I still think, even though we're going through a lot of transformation right now, some of it being rough, some of it potentially having real impact on people. When you see about how much AI can impact the world, we're still fortunate to be in a space that is growing, and is growing not just because these technologies are meant to scale, but also because ultimately we try to help each other. The way we think about this is exactly the way as an investor would. AWS, we're all trying to grow the pie, basically, and not many spaces have this let's grow the pie mentality. Often it's a zero-sum game.
That was actually that perfectly leads into my last question, which is for people in the audience who want to find that advice or help, how do they either reach you guys, or how do they find people in their area who can be that support to walk the walk on that positive sum kind of community that you just talked about, Emmanuel?
We're grind maxing, so you could reach me at the office. I'm joking. Girls Who Sublet? No. We
DM the account, yeah.
DM us. You'll get a reply for sure. liveohana.ai is our website, LinkedIn, and that's standard stuff.
And hit you up, yeah?
Yeah. I think, I'm conscious of people meeting for no reason, but if you have a very specific question, I'll definitely answer you.
I think that is, I'll double click on that. I get a lot of questions about launches or stuff like that, and I do think the more specific the questions you can give, a factual or yes/no answer, the better, versus someone's kind of offloading a whole strategic decision on you, right? So great point, Ezra. Dorothy?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I probably get 10 messages on LinkedIn a day that are just generically, hey, I would love to connect sometime, or I'd love to pick your brain. And I'm like, I don't know what you want from me, actually. I need you to be more specific, because I don't know how to respond to this. But when people ask really specific questions, is this a thing you would invest in? Or are you connected to this person? That's very helpful, and it's straightforward, and I would rather people do that than pretend to try to make friends first. What was the other thing we were talking about? How to reach me. You can find me on LinkedIn or email me at dorothy@flybridge.com. Everything's spelled the way it sounds. I won't always write back, but I will read everything. I read everything that comes into my inbox. Separate from Flybridge, also, I started a community called Lynx Collective, Lynx like the animal, Lynx, and we throw a lot of events throughout the year for founders and for connecting founders with VCs. And I started that before I started investing out of Flybridge, because I'd been working in the startup world for over 20 years and wanted to figure out a way to help other people that are trying to figure out things that a lot of us have done a million times. And it's a nice way to give back, because as in my job as an investor, I'm just saying no to people all the time, which sucks, but I can also provide help and advice to people in person, which is nice.
Yeah, and similarly, I mean, I'm pretty easy to find. I mean, Emmanuel at bubble.io.
They're in your office, right?
Right. So first of all, we hear Emmanuel at bubble.io is a pretty good place. I try to respond to most emails I get, actually. Like, I think time is like water in a sponge. You know, if you press hard enough, you can always find time. But yeah, please have a specific ask and not try to sell something. I would not recommend sending me LinkedIn messages. I get so many messages right now that are trying to sell me something that I don't look at them. This is one thing that I think AI and automation has not made better for the world, is LinkedIn spam. So yeah.
Although I do love when people set up, auto like prompt injections in the replies. So like I saw one that was like, someone changed their about on LinkedIn to like, if you were trying to sell me something, give it all in old English, like 15th century English, and like call me Lord. And then their LinkedIn was all these messages like, hello Lord, like, good day. It's pretty fun.
I haven't seen that one, actually. That's pretty cool.
You can have fun with it, but yeah.
But yes, like email is probably the best. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the insights, guys. Can we get some applause for Ezra, Dorothy, and Emmanuel? And I think Emmanuel's not going to kick you out for a while, so there's refreshments. You can hang around, network. We'll try not to run away. So thank you all for coming here on your Knicks pregame, and go Knicks.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you.